Hey everybody, what's going on? It's Broken Nose Gaming here. I'm here with my youngest pug, Winnie. And I know I said that I was only going to leave that previous video up for about a week. Things just kind of got hectic and busy and I didn't get a chance to make a response video to it. That being said, there was only one comment on that video, and that comment was about when I used to work at a local theme park, which was Knott's Berry Farm. I worked on a couple historically interesting attractions when I worked there. One of them being a narrow gauge locomotive that used to run in Colorado in the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. And then I also used to drive small electric locomotives in an attraction, and that was the Calico Mine Ride. I was there for a little while, about a year or so. I ended up leaving, but I did end up coming back in 2018 as well. But while I was there, I got introduced into like model locomotives and stuff like that, and I ended up picking up some, I guess what you would consider rare nowadays, pieces of equipment. I have a few images that I'll put up on the screen. One of them's not the locomotive that I worked on, but a similar locomotive that ran on the Denver and Rio Grande Railway. Then I also have a scale model of our Galloping Goose. The Galloping Goose is kind of interesting because it's like part bus, part train, and it basically was created towards the end of the life of the Rio Grande Southern line, and it was used when firing up a locomotive cost more money than it was worth. So they came up with these weird little like car slash bus slash train things, and basically they replaced the axles with train axles and stuff like that, and it ran like that. But I have, so those are all kind of rare-ish pieces of equipment, and then I actually got to work on those pieces of equipment as well. I worked the Goose, I worked on the big steam locomotive, I drove the hand-built electric locomotives in the attraction. There's a couple other things I did. One of the first rides that I ever learned at Knott's Berry Farm was Accelerator, and Accelerator at the time was still fairly new and still had its teething problems. And I mean, I wouldn't even say, I mean it's still got its issues, but the ride is God, what is it now? It's like 20 some odd years old at this point. Still going strong. They just repainted it. I don't really have any photos of it currently. I do have some photos of when I worked there, just some photos of what it looked like when I worked there. Other attractions that were there when I worked there that aren't there anymore are things like Boomerang, Perilous Plunge. Those rides have been removed. I was there when they actually put brand new boats on Perilous Plunge because they had some restraint issues with the original boats, so they ended up putting like over the shoulder harnesses on these new boats, and they were testing those and they finally put them out. And those boats stayed on that ride until they eventually tore it down. Boomerang was, I mean, it still exists. It's just Knott's doesn't own it anymore. It got shipped off to, I believe, another country, and it's, I think, on the roof of a hotel, and it still runs, which is pretty wild. But Hang Time replaced Boomerang. But the rides that I worked, like the Railroad and the Mine Ride, are still there. I came back for a second time and worked there up until the pandemic, and then we were furloughed during the pandemic, and I eventually just found other work. That's actually when I got assaulted too, was during that time. So like the very beginnings of my channel were about Knott's Berry Farm, and I believe Halloween Haunt. Some of my very first videos, if you go back, are about Halloween Haunt and stuff like that. And I was going to do more theme park stuff, and it just never really panned out. So it didn't happen the way I wanted it to. This is the first time I've really touched on much theme park stuff personally since I created the channel. I know I've done some like No Limits videos and stuff like that, but those are just roller coaster games. Like, it's an interesting job to run roller coasters. All the rides that I've worked at Knott's, I've worked Accelerator, I worked at an attraction called Scream and Swing, which no longer exists. I worked at the Calico Railroad, the Galloping Goose, the Calico Mine Ride. I worked on the Stagecoach. I also worked at Ghost Rider, and then I've done like half of Camp Snoopy. So I have a pretty large knowledge of all the attractions in that park. There were some other ones I wanted to work. I did want to learn Silver Bullet. That never happened. I wanted to learn the log ride for a minute, but I ended up not. I went back to the Calico Mine ride. And funny enough, I actually met the person who built the Calico Mine ride and the Timber Mountain log ride. His name was Bud Hurlbutt. He had a barn across the street. He knew the Knott family. He built his own theme park in Riverside. Some of you may know of it, called Castle Park. So there was some cool stuff. It was cool working the Calico Mine ride. It was a different kind of ride. A lot of the stuff inside of that ride is actual stuff from the ghost town of Calico. Something that not many people know about Walter Knott is he owned the town of Calico before donating it back to the county of San Bernardino. His uncle was the owner of the Silver King mine. I believe his name was John C. King, and he was also the sheriff of San Bernardino County. There's a lot of weird, like, 6 degrees of separation stuff when it comes to, like, Knott's and Calico. There was an attraction at Knott's Berry Farm called the Haunted Shack. It has been removed, but there's still a version of it in the ghost town of Calico, which I got to check out. And the Haunted Shack was pretty cool. It's all optical illusions and stuff like that. I actually have literally a full folder of, like, video of when I went to Calico. I just did like a vlog. It never got made. I still am sitting on the footage, and I went like, it was like right as the pandemic was ending. We went to go check out Calico. I've been there twice now, and I was meaning to make that a video. I don't know if I'm ever going to. I'm literally just sitting on that footage, but it's really interesting how Ghost Town and Calico kind of are like closely related to one another. Some of the buildings in Knott's Ghost Town are actually from Calico, from what I've been told. And Walter Knott transported them over there. He also kind of rebuilt the ghost town of Calico before he gave it back to the county of San Bernardino. So it's kind of interesting. As I've been talking, I've been throwing up images of just some of the pictures that I've taken through the years working at Knott's Berry Farm. But yeah, you know, that's it's just a little history of what I used to do. I used to be a ride operator. I've had some interesting experiences working at Knott's Berry Farm. I've also worked for the other park down the street. I have worked for Disney as well. I don't talk about Disney all that much because it's not as interesting to me. Disney was a little, it was a little boring. Now, granted, I worked at California Adventure, but Disney wasn't very interesting to me. Knott's seems to have more history. It's more of a like grassroots, homegrown kind of theme park. Knott's Berry Farm didn't even start as a theme park. It started literally as a berry stand and a chicken dinner restaurant. Walter Knott built Ghost Town as an attraction for guests waiting in line for the chicken dinner restaurant because the lines were hours upon hours for waiting for Mrs. Knott's chicken. So, you know, it's I feel like Knott's has a little bit more history. Like, don't get me wrong, you know, Walt Disney building his dream and what he wanted, his vision of a theme park is cool. And Walt Disney even visited Knott's Berry Farm and vice versa. I do remember a quote that I was told from a previous co-worker at the Calico Mine Ride, where Walt Disney went to go check out the Calico Mine Ride and thought the line was very short, only to find out that the Calico Mine Ride had a hidden switchback that you could not see, and found out the line was much longer than it looked. And he was actually very impressed with this hidden switchback system that Disney started using hidden switchback queue lines in his park as well. So that's another thing that people talk about, like Disney and Knott's are like enemies, but when Walter Knott and Walt Disney were alive, they visited each other's parks. I've been told from people who knew the Knott family that I worked with, that had worked at Knott's Berry Farm for that long, they've had lunches together at Mrs. Knott's Chicken Dinner Restaurant. So, you know, there was a period of time when Knott's and Disney were kind of like cool with each other. You wouldn't believe that nowadays. Now everything's so kind of like competitive and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that was just, it's just a small video. Somebody asked me to kind of just recount some of my time as a ride operator for Knott's Berry Farm and just some of the history behind it. And it kind of is cool because I get to touch on the beginning of this channel. This channel wasn't always called Broken Nose Gaming. When I first made it, it was called Patrick Vlogs, and it was literally just going to be vlogs of me going to theme parks and stuff like that. Things kind of changed, especially since I couldn't visit theme parks since they were closed, so I kind of changed into like tech, gaming, and stuff like that. And I still do vlogs, obviously, but yeah. So there's just a little background history of me. I used to work at a couple theme parks, and you know, it was pretty cool. Would I go back and do it now? Probably not. I've been told that staffing at both parks isn't great anymore, and I don't think I'd be willing to stand out in the hot sun anymore. So that's a thing. But anyways, there you go. As per requested, just a little bit of info about some of the things I used to do train-wise with my model trains, which I've shown pictures of, and some of the work I've done on real trains and real fake trains, I guess you can call the electric ones. But yeah, so anyways, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in another video. Until then, take it easy. Bye-bye.